Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our family question Zoom call with President Zupan and Vice President Kimberly Geyer, as well as some other AU guests. My name is Jonathan Kent. I'm the Vice President for Enrollment Management, and it's great to be here. I will be calling on you for those of you that have questions and would like to, if you could just raise your hand in the Zoom platform on the bottom, and then I will call on you and you can ask your question. If you do not feel comfortable asking the question live, feel free to write it in the chat and I will get it to ask one of our AU team members. With that said, I'd love to turn it over to President Zupan.
Thank you all for joining us. Thank you most of all for entrusting your sons and daughters to an education at Alfred University. We're recording this session because there were a number of family members that couldn't join us live, and we'll deliver the video to them asynchronously. We're into week 3 right now. It's the second day of in-person classes. We were teaching in person yesterday and took a good chunk of yesterday afternoon to walk around campus, and can't tell you how energizing it is to being at a college campus as close as you get to the fountain of youth. So it's those of us that are involved with education, it's that magic that compels us and that motivates us. It was great to see classes in session, from how glass blowing's done in these COVID-19 times to engineering instruction. So some classes are easier to deliver online than others, but it was also fascinating to see the creativity. Just the check-in points, for example, in Harder Hall, where most of our school of art and design students have their spaces to do art. The new classroom capacity that's been added in places like the ground floor of Scholes Library and some open areas in Herrick Library. So our facility staff, our deans, our faculty have been hard at work getting ready for this moment. And we'll just leave it at that. We'll open up, we'll first turn it over to Kim Geyer, who's our Vice President of Student Affairs, for some opening remarks. The magic number today is 79. So it helps. It's kind of this inverse of Zeno's paradox. Zeno was this ancient Greek philosopher that said if you are trying to reach something and each day you go half the way, you'll never get there. And we're trying to break it down, but in a more productive fashion. 79 today is the number of days between now and the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, which is our last final. So, but who's counting? But just mentally, we find that if we can take it step by step, and each day we're treating as a gift that we're able to stay in person. And the students, by and large, your sons and daughters have been great about wearing masks, even when they're outdoors and socially distanced. The overwhelming majority are wearing masks on campus. But there are cases where we've had to stop people, talk to them. Ran into a trio this afternoon or this morning who had set up an improvised weightlifting area above 4th Street Apartments, and they were pretty close together, weren't wearing masks, didn't have disinfecting wipes or liquid with them. So talked to them, had our football coach follow up with them as well. We're relying on a variety of means, whether it's coaches, RAs, RDs, student roving ambassadors, our student senate, to just constantly communicate the message of being safe and adhering to the protocols. And anything you can do from your perspective as family members, please, we need your help as well, and we're deeply appreciative for it. So Kim, on to you.
Everyone, thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Dr. Kimberly Geyer. I'm the Vice President for Student Affairs, and I've been here at Alfred for just over a year. It has been quite an interesting year. Certainly this year is not anything like we would have hoped, but I think that everyone is really making the best of it. And as President Zupan said, it's really wonderful to see all the students back on campus and feel the energy, especially now that we're into the in-person classes. It's not typical, but it's wonderful to see people out and about again and to see our students back. So we hope that they're having a great start to the semester, and thanks for joining us tonight. I guess I'll turn it over to Dr. Tamara Kenny. She's our Dean of Student Wellbeing to say hello.
Hi, good evening. Much as President Zupan and Vice President Geyer have said, it's wonderful to have students back on campus. The energy is great. And they're doing a great job wearing their masks for the most part. So again, just as President Zupan said, if you can please work with your students to encourage them to follow the guidelines, we should be in good shape for the fall semester.
And just a couple other updates really quickly. If you didn't see the email, we were going to do surveillance testing throughout the fall, a sample every week. But then there was a party in town a couple of weeks ago. It turned out it was composed of students from Alfred State playing on the hockey team. And we decided after that, better play it safe, in addition to talking to that house with my counterpart at Alfred State. And he read him the riot act and basically said they're all gone. If he ever sees that happen again, he'll bypass the judicial process. It's been quiet, but we decided to ramp up the testing we do, especially in the first 2 weeks. So we started the first round of testing on Friday, focused on students residing in the nearby area off campus, because schools, universities have been tracking off campus, on campus. The lion's share of the problem is off campus. The Ohio State University in Columbus, Ohio, for example, started tracking this late last week. They had 3 times the positive testing rate off campus than for their on-campus students. So we decided to start with that group. Each of the samples, it's a saliva-based sample, it's a pool of 12. We collected 120 total samples, 10 pools across that 120. And we found out late Sunday that all of them were negative. We're doing this in partnership with the Upstate Medical Center that's based in the Syracuse area. It's the same outfit that the entire SUNY system is now relying on, and similarly is ramping up the testing that they do. This week and next week, we'll be going through the entire student body. So the next round of testing occurs tomorrow. We expect a 24 to 48 hour turnaround time. And then the Upstate Medical Center has gotten state approval, but they're still waiting for a minor change in FDA approval so that they can do something called reflex testing, that everybody's saliva individually as well as in their pools gets taken to the Upstate Medical Center. If there's a positive, people don't have to be retested. They just look at the saliva samples comprising the positive pool, find out who's positive in that group, and then we can move more quickly and mitigate the number of people that need to be quarantined as a result of a positive test. So we expect that FDA approval reasonably soon. It's a minor wording change on their bags that the Upstate Medical Center had to change. But it's, anyway, we're gonna take it day by day, and then after the first 2.5 weeks, we'll go back into surveillance mode and ramp up if we need to with broader based testing if a problem emerges.
There are a few more AU members who have joined us. Michael Kozlowski is our Executive Director for Marketing Communications. He has been working hand in hand with Dr. Geyer with the reopening plan. Dalray Honeycutt is here, the Director of the Wellness Center. And I think John Lewis is here as well, Director of Student Activities. So he's in charge of bringing all the fun stuff to campus. There are a couple questions that have been asked in the chat. Jackie Cantor asked that her daughter, who is a first-year student, was scheduled to take a ceramics course, but was canceled before the start of school because of COVID concerns. Are there plans to restart these kinds of in-person classes?
About half our classes right now are face-to-face or traditional model. 25% are hybrid, half in person, half online, and 25% are online. So would encourage your daughter to reach out to the assistant dean and work with that assistant dean. What are the best substitutes? I don't know whether it's a ceramic art class or a ceramic engineering class. It might have been the demographics of the faculty member involved, but to work with the assistant dean to find the best options.
Another question was asked by Kim Rober, and I apologize for pronouncing some names wrong. Was wondering, has anyone tested positive on campus yet?
To date, or in the recent time, no. We did have a staff member in March that tested positive, and according to New York State guidelines, the relevant time period for us is going to be over the last 14 days. And so over the last 14 days, everybody's been negative that's been tested.
Right. If there's anyone who would like to raise their hand as well, feel free to do so. Going down the group chat, Peter Short has asked, what about flu shots? I saw something about a clinic on campus last week, and are students being encouraged to get the flu shot? Del Rey?
Yeah, so we are encouraging students to get the flu shot. We are holding a few of them our own here on campus. One was last Thursday. We'll have another one this Thursday. They are $15 to be charged directly to the student's account. We are also holding a couple in pharmacy. They will be $30, but he has the ability to bill insurance. So if that's the route you or your student wants to take, feel free. But again, we will be hosting our own flu clinics, and it'll be $50 for the vaccine charged directly to the student account. So there doesn't need to be an exchange of cash or anything of that nature.
And our big flu season tends to be once we come back from Allen term in January. So we're going to be even more actively promoting it as we get closer to that time period. And in all likelihood, right now, we've had some initial discussions. We will be starting a week or two later. Usually we start the last week of January, both to mitigate any, or to mitigate the dangers of any flu season and its effects, and also to give more time for a vaccine or therapeutic to be developed. So those are just starting right now in planning stage.
Raise your hand to ask the question, feel free. MSG, you do have your hand raised, but you also wrote in the chat. Did you want to ask the question out loud, or would you like me to read it, MSG? They can unmute. All right. So
you could just read it. You could just read what I typed in the chat.
Okay. All right. Thanks. My understanding was the first 2 weeks were online and then classes would start thereafter. However, talking to my son, all his classes are still online. Why is that? And is there any way to change it to in-class instruction? Him being a first-year student, I don't think it's a good idea for my son to have online classes.
Yeah, it depends on the faculty members involved. He should still have certain labs that will occur in person. So I would talk to Emily Carney, who's the assistant dean, in what options might be in engineering, as well as Gabby Gausted, Dr. Gausted, our engineering dean, to explore those options. But the demographics in our engineering school in particular are skewed older, and we have a higher proportion of online classes in the engineering school than in other units.
Steve Grimaldi.
So he's not in the engineer track. He's doing a childhood education track.
And first year student, you said?
Correct.
Okay. So I would have him talk then to Tim Nichols, who's the education department head, or
Okay.
Dave Hood, who's the dean of college liberal arts and sciences, where education resides.
Okay.
Sorry,
Appreciate it.
No problem.
Is there a number to contact them, or?
Toot is, I believe, we'll put it in the chat room.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'll
sounds
look it
good.
up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Steve Grimaldi has asked, have any Alfred students been hospitalized due to COVID?
No.
All right.
I responded to that in the chat, Jonathan.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No problem. Sorry.
I'm trying to play catch up. Tracy has mentioned for those classes that continue online, which are very unfortunate, all of my son's engineering class except for his labs, will these go live soon? We were under the impression that returning this fall meant live classes and not 100% online, but that doesn't seem to be the case.
Well, the averages I quoted earlier are across the entire university. We do have cases like in engineering where because of faculty demographics, similar to ADA requirements, we gave them the opportunity to opt out if they're in an at-risk group. And so that disproportionately has affected our engineering. So we hope by the spring with a vaccine or therapeutic that we'll be in a better spot.
And just to follow up with COVID question, and maybe Michael will get this, but either Michael or probably Delray, will every Alfred student be tested?
Yes.
I respond, but I'm happy to let Delray respond as well.
Yes, so we are working on testing all students with the saliva-based test. As President mentioned earlier, we started that last Friday with our off-campus students. It was a random sample. Those students who were not part of that sample were asked to sign up for this Wednesday or Friday. So we'll continue to test students in mass numbers. Around 252 students are signed up for tomorrow. We'll be doing testing all day, Wednesday, Friday, and we'll continue it on through next week, just to make sure that we get all the students within those 2 weeks.
And something to add, if we get a negative, if your son or daughter gets a negative, the best way to interpret that negative is that you didn't have COVID-19 7 days ago. So if you get complacent and think you're bulletproof, these things, as we saw at Aniana, can quickly turn. The university right now that's been most praised for their testing is the University of Illinois. They're doing 17,000 plus tests a day, rapid turnaround. And over the summer, they drove their positivity rate from 2.5% to 0.55%. Last week, they reported that now they're seeing problems reemerge because people think everything's fine. We're doing this massive testing, and students ended up partying, especially at off-campus locations. Now they're seeing their positivity rate climb. So the more you can stress with your son or daughter that it's important to keep your guard up. And if we continue to get negatives, we just have to continue to be as guarded as possible and not overcompensate in a complacent direction.
I think just to add to what President Zupan said, they're presumptive negatives. And I think that is important to remember. When we get the results, it's presumptive. So just making sure, again, that when students get that presumptive negative, that they understand that there is a chance that there could be some inaccuracy. It's a small chance, but there is still a chance. And so we want to make sure that students are not letting their guard down, even if they get that presumptive negative result.
Thanks, Delray.
And will the students be tested more than once?
Yes.
John Lewis question from Don Smith Sherwood. Recognizing the inherent challenges, we are curious about what kinds of activities or programs will be possible to welcome and socialize first-year students into the community, and probably to Tamara as well. Question. So I don't know.
Yep.
Let's go
Yep.
first.
I can start just because the past 2 days we've been doing tabling on Academic Alley, basically the road that all of the students are walking on to go from class to class. So the Center for Student Involvement, our office has been tabling, and we've been hearing from a lot of first years, just wondering what's happening, what's going on. So I'm happy to report that we did virtual programming for the first 2 weeks, but this coming weekend, Friday is our first live event we're doing an obstacle course around campus. Then it's all set up to be safe. We're going to encourage students to wear masks, but it'll be some matches, solving puzzles, and then maybe working through a jungle gym type setup. In between each team, everything will be sterilized. If we have plenty of volunteers to help with, that's Friday from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. And we're following that Saturday with sessions of bingo on the lawn of the Brick. So the Friday night obstacle course is set up around campus. Friday night in the Brick lawn, we're going to have hula hoops set up for 25 students in a session. And we've talked today in a meeting about how we're going to be cleaning up in between each session. So all of that information and then more that's coming in the coming weekend, like outdoor movie nights and putt course that we're having brought in, that can all be found on auconnect.alfred.edu, as well as the Cork app, and that's CORQ, is a free app for students. So we had a lot of questions about that today, telling students all about AU Connect and the Cork app and these different events coming up. I think we're going to get some positive momentum moving into the weekend to get some, especially first year students acclimated, but as well.
John, could you just put some of that information in the chat so the families can see that too, about the link and the Cork app and stuff?
For those of you with Verizon, you were trying to reach your son or daughter, a truck ran over 6 poles in town. So either somebody with a big vendetta against Verizon or a major substance abuse issue. It's really hard to knock out that many poles. But a team was able to follow up. We reached out to an alum who's our congressional rep, as well as a representative in the governor's office, to get the repairs speeded up. So we're back in business as of yesterday evening. So,
Tamara, did you want to add anything?
The only thing I would add to that is last week I was able to host all hall meetings for each of the residence halls to not only talk about COVID specific safety and guidelines for that, but also to answer any questions that students had. At that time, the RAs and the RD introduced themselves and shared some information about the halls. So I know that the residence life staff is trying to get connected to your students. It's been a little delayed given all of the COVID and all of those kind of things that are happening, but I know that they are also developing some programming to complement what John shared, but more in the hall, whether it's passive programming or small meet and greets, obviously with all the safety precautions in place.
One thing I would add to what John mentioned earlier is that students choose the activities for the most part. So the ideas for what we're implementing and what's happening on campus are really student driven, which is great because they're choosing what they want to do, and hopefully that means more of them are interested in doing them rather than us picking and hoping someone would be interested.
Thanks. Mary, you have your hand raised, so I'm going to call on you.
Hi. I just wanted to, I don't really have a question, and I don't even have a concern, but I have work that you guys have all done in figuring this out over the many, many months. And I've been watching the rate of positive tests throughout universities, and I'm so excited that my son is having a great time there. And really, it's just been wonderful. And I just wanted to thank you for all the great stuff that all of you have done, because I know how many hours and how many fantastic and ideas that have gone into making all this work. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mary.
Thanks, Mary.
Team effort.
There was someone by the name of Christy who would like to ask a question as well. I don't know if her hand is raised though, so Mari might have a hard time finding.
I think I'm here.
Oh, there you go.
the
Christy
class.
Dietrich.
Again, I would also say thank you so much for hosting this and for the information that you put out there. My son is a junior. He resides in the Ford Street Apartments. And my question, or I just want to share with you his experience, because he is from Pennsylvania and we're not on the hot list. So he chose to come back this weekend. So he arrived on September 5th. All of his roommates, his cohorts, 3 of them, have been there since the 22nd. And when he arrived on Saturday, they were sharing with him just the difficulties they were having with dining and obtaining food. And between the 3 of them, they decided to drop their dining programs. Christopher, my son tried to do that, but the form was closed because I guess he missed the deadline. But he had not been on campus. I'm trying to allow him to navigate this by himself, but he's hitting a wall with it. And I would just like to share that I just feel that all of us are extending grace to each other through this. And I just wish that we would also extend grace to these kids in regards to deadlines, because he just arrived on campus. He hasn't been there since the 22nd. He didn't get a chance to form that opinion. And that's just my feedback on it. I just hope that.
Christy, I would recommend that he email Residence Life at Alfred, and I'll put that in the chat, as well as myself, and we can assist him.
Yeah, we've done that. He's done that.
Okay.
He's done an appeal. It was just the response and the feedback. I just feel that, again, we're all trying to extend each other grace, and I feel like he kind of got the response of the old school. Well, you should have read, what the deadlines are, but he only arrived last week. So I just really hope that he's given consideration with that. And I just know that, again, he's in a cohort. So he has a cohort of 4 students, and he's the 4th. He just arrived. And if they've decided that they want to all have their meals communally together, I really think that it's in their best interest and the community's best interest for them to do that, because that's going to reduce their risk as well.
Thank you, Christy.
And Christy, if there were issues with the roommates, that he could encourage them to provide us feedback so we can map that into how we improve AU Fresh.
Thank you. I will.
And I'll put that contact email in the chat as well.
Thank you.
Cindy Kearns asked, in the spring, students were given the option to receive a grade or to choose pass-fail for online classes. Is that happening again this semester?
Not this semester. We still found, and this was the faculty's decision, that grades are helpful to promote learning. So especially if we're able to maintain face-to-face classes or a significant portion face-to-face, we're going to stick with grades. There are courses, I believe, where you can still opt in the individual course to take the class pass-fail, but it isn't available on a blanket basis.
Diana Leo has a question. She raised her hand.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. First, I'd like to echo what everyone else has said. I think you guys are doing a great job. And of course, our students are participating in doing that. But I think all the planning and everything has really paid off. My question is that if things continue to go this well, is there any chance of reconsidering the earlier decision that all of the students' things have to be taken out of their rooms over the break? Because I thought, my understanding was originally that they had to clear out their rooms because they needed to be deep cleaned. But I mean, in talking to people, it seems that that's not how this virus works. It doesn't stay on things, and it's airborne. And so I'm just hoping that there will be some reconsideration about us having to schlep everything out and bring it all back for the spring.
Yeah, there were several reasons for that, although of course, yes, we'll see how things go. And Tamara, feel free to jump in if you'd like. I will mention there were a couple reasons, specifically hoping that students might pack light, just given that we weren't sure how things were gonna go. And we didn't want to have students have to move in a lot of stuff and have to move a lot back out, anytime soon. Also for the opportunity to clean, and then just not knowing what the winter will hold and knowing when the semester might start. Of course, we have our plans to start, as President Zupan said. But just in case, we wouldn't want students to have to leave all their stuff behind for a long length of time or have to find storage and pay for storage if we're not able to open on time. Tamara, did you want to add anything to that?
No, Kim, I think that's exactly right. I mean, I think we'll continue to monitor the situation. I think one of the biggest decisions we have to look at is what is the course of the virus going into the spring semester before we determine whether we'll be able to leave belongings in the halls or not.
So if at all possible, we're leaning toward that change, but it hasn't been made yet. And probably the biggest variable is what the state government does. We've heard from the FDA and Dr. Fauci at the federal level, if you have to pause to go online, don't disperse the students. Or even if you have to go fully online, keep them on campus because it mitigates the risk of the virus spreading. That's been the Department of Health's position too recently in the state of New York. But we ended up having to go fully online because the governor mandated in March that all campuses basically had to shut down and go fully online. So that's, we're gonna have to keep monitoring and see how the other campuses do around the state. Even in Aniana, there's a Wall Street Journal article today, notwithstanding the Fauci advice, the FDA advice, the state advice, they were still sending students home instead of keeping them on campus and I think they're close to 600 cases now that are positive there.
Gary Sumner asked, non-COVID related question. My daughter came in as a freshman with most of her first year classes under her belt from Washington State. How long does she need to stay in the residence halls versus sharing an apartment with some friends in the village?
Tamara, do you want to take that one?
So our general rule of thumb based on our residency requirement is 6 semesters on campus. However, if there are extenuating circumstances, they can certainly apply for a waiver, and we'd be considering that case by case.
Maybe a recommendation for John and Kim and Tamara, but any thoughts of televising the Buffalo Bills game on the football field?
Good idea. We'll add that to the list.
Sarah Philippe, you have a question, raised your hand.
Yes, I'd like to know if a student can take foundation online, because I was told when I went on the tour that they were not able to, my son was not able to do foundation online, and basically that's what he's worrying about.
Dan Napolitano can confirm, or Lauren Lake, our assistant dean and dean, but I'm virtually positive the foundations is in person. But they can work with your student in terms of finding options, because there are other requirements that need to be fulfilled. If in certain cases somebody decided, well, I'm going to wait a year to do the foundations program.
I do know too from working with first year students that Dan Napolitano, much like Mark mentioned, is creating some alternative options during the winter plan that we offer, Allen term, and then also in the spring semester. So Sarah, like Mark said, be in touch with Dan Napolitano as he will be able to guide you for that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
It is pretty amazing and harder what Dan and the team have done to ensure appropriate disinfection, appropriate distancing. Students were hard at work at that building yesterday, so it was great to see.
Leanne has a question about what is the plan if a student or staff member tests positive? Will the student quarantine in their dorm room with the rest of their roommates or sent home? And assuming that students' contacts also have to quarantine, who is included in their contacts? I don't know if that's a Del Rey question.
All right. Yeah,
you're on the spot.
That's fine. I might have to ask you to repeat it, Jonathan, just because there were a couple questions within.
Sure.
So if there is someone who tests positive, they will be moved to one of our isolation suites. We will begin the contact tracing during that time. If they are in a suite already and there's 3 or 4, then those individuals will be moved to our quarantine suite. The reason why we do that is because we have to essentially quarantine and isolate those away from the rest of the individuals within the hall. So all the individuals in the suite will be moved to quarantine, and we would monitor for symptoms. The individual who tested positive would be moved to isolation in their own suite. Once we begin the contact tracing, one of the things that I've requested and hopefully we'll be able to move through with is for the in-person classes, having some way of keeping track of the students and where they're sitting. We'll be working collaboratively with the health department during these times. So if, for example, there is a small class and the rooms are ventilated in such a way and they're situated where there is enough distance, for example, we might be able to not quarantine the entire class depending on the class length, depending on the environment of the classroom and things of that nature. In addition, we would essentially talk to the person who tested positive to find out through the contact tracing process who they may have been in contact with 2 days prior to the day they tested positive. So all of that it's a pretty lengthy process, but we're used to doing it for other infectious diseases, and so we'll see how that continues to play out. But right now, again, we're fortunate. There have been no positives, so I'm hoping that we continue in that direction.
There's a question too, if we have to quarantine or isolate. We've been working with our faculty on capturing the materials, so just like a student that became sick for another reason, to ensure that they have the means to keep up during their quarantine or isolation period.
All right. Hillary asks, I know that there's a 60-mile radius for students. I'm curious about the thinking behind this and also about interaction between the students and the surrounding area in general. What advice or guidelines are they given, and any special precautions?
That might be a mix of folks to answer. I'll start by saying we decided on the 60-mile radius because that is the distance where we permit students typically to commute from. So it was in line with that. Delray and Tamara may want to add, let's see, sorry, I'm looking back here at the question. In terms of the interactions, you know, we can talk about here in the village where we ask that students wear their mask or face covering at all times. The same is true on campus unless they're at least 6 feet apart and outside, not running into anyone. So that's the key. And Delray, Tamara, do you want to add anything else about special precautions or guidelines?
I'll defer to Delray on that. I agree with everything you've said in terms of the 60-mile radius.
So even though there is that 60-mile allotment, we are still asking that students avoid traveling outside of this immediate area. And part of that is going back to what President Zupan has been saying for the last few weeks in protecting our bubble. The more someone travels, there's an increase in likelihood for being exposed. So we are asking that students only leave for essential appointments, like let's say they have a doctor's appointment or they have to go and pick up a prescription, things of that nature, so that again we can protect our bubble here and reduce the potential for exposure from outside elements.
Oops, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, we are asking students that do need to leave for an emergency situation. For example, we had a death in the family, to please notify the residence life staff of how long they're going to be gone, where they're going, and that if they do travel to a travel advisory state, they will need to quarantine upon their return. That has not been the case at this time, but they should also contact my office so we can also monitor who's been traveling.
And one of the challenges is the list keeps changing. For example, earlier today, the state of New York put 4 additional states back on the list, including Maryland, Ohio, Delaware, and then West Virginia got added. Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands got kicked off. So if you're in that state, when it gets to the travel advisory list, the quarantine rules would apply to your son or daughter. And Tamara and Kim have been leading an effort called Protect the Lux, where we're asking each student to publicly affirm, I'm responsible for taking these steps to protect the bubble. So if your son or daughter hasn't done that yet, please encourage them to do so.
To follow off from that same question, Tony asks, are you allowed to have visitors? If so, what are the limits for visits outside, off campus? If they're close to home, can they take the trip home for the weekend? Will they need to be tested for COVID? And lastly, is there a plan? We already answered the question about the end of the semester plan for move out. Delray, is that you again? About visitors, or Kim?
So visitors have to have a purpose for being on campus and have to check in with public safety and do the screening. I'll let Tamara answer the rest of the question, because I again would discourage that, because the more we have individuals coming in, the more exposed we are potentially. So just as we don't want students to leave, we're asking that we avoid visitors as well.
So agreed. As much as possible, we'd prefer people not to come visit campus. I know that might sound kind of harsh, but just exactly as Delray has laid out, it certainly does reduce our risk of any type of exposure. If for some reason you do need to come to campus for an emergency, or you need to drop something off that the student really needs, we do ask that you do not enter any of the residence halls. Actually meet your student outside after you've stopped at public safety to have your health screening completed. If you're traveling from a travel advisory state, we would really ask you not to visit our campus during the fall semester. I think one of the things that's important to know, as President Zupan, he has the numbers down. We're going to be finished with classes right before Thanksgiving, so it is a much shorter semester than average, and just to try to keep that in mind a little bit. Try to correspond with your student with FaceTime or Zoom or any of those things we had to learn about yesterday when our wireless service was down. But we really would like to keep the campus as safe as possible so that we can keep our students as long as possible.
And we're anything that's not essential, we're encouraging, as Tamara, Delray, and Kim have mentioned, not to promote those visits to campus until we get to the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. For example, we normally meet with our board. They're our most generous donors in person at the end of October. We're doing that by Zoom. Church services, a variety of groups typically hold religious services. We're doing those by Zoom. We do a major Bergeron Forum, an educational lecture every week. That's converted for the fall to by Zoom. So just relying, it's not ideal, but we've got to balance. First and foremost, health and safety of the community has to be protected with the education we provide and the learning opportunities outside of the classroom as well.
Holly Lactaudis has her hand raised for a question. Sorry, Holly, for the last name.
No, that's fine. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Two questions. One you may have already answered. I know they're going to be given multiple COVID tests throughout the semester, but do you know how often that's going to take place?
All right. Or Mark.
Okay.
So we are doing all student body within these next 2 weeks. If we have to stretch it into the third week, we will. And then after that, there'll be surveillance testing in which we will take 50% of specific areas each week and test on a surveillance sample basis. So we'll continue that throughout the semester.
Okay, and I had two other quick questions. Will the work-study program continue?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there are a number of work-study opportunities posted and available right now. Students can apply, and if they have questions about finding them, the Career Development Center is helping students find opportunities. And there are also a limited number of student worker positions that are not work study, so that if a student did not qualify for work study, they can still find some opportunities across campus. Some are remote as opposed to in person, just given the nature of this semester, but there are both types of
Great,
opportunities.
thank you so much. My last question in regards to the visits, if there was an absolute need to come to the school, who do we call? I know you mentioned a name, maybe you could put it in the chat where we could schedule that or make them aware why we think we might need to come. Again, I understand it's for emergency only, but I didn't see where we had to go to contact for that pre-test.
Yeah, you would just check in at the Office of Public Safety. They'll take the visitor's temperature and do a screening there on site. So you don't have to notify them ahead of time, but just check in there, and then they'll ask you a few questions, take the temperature, and then you'll be on your way.
Okay, thank you. I thought we would need an appointment. Okay, thank you.
I would just add that public safety is here from Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. until 3 a.m. However, on Saturdays and Sundays, they are only here from 5 p.m. to 3 a.m. So if you are coming during a time, especially during a time that may be more busy for them, just as admissions does, I think it would be appropriate to call them and let them know that you're coming so that they can have someone ready and available to do the screening, if possible.
We've actually expanded those hours, Delray.
Perfect.
So now that's less of an issue. They're opening on the weekends on Saturdays and Sundays at 8 a.m.
Oh, wonderful. Okay.
Fine if you, like Delray said, if you want to call and check in advance, that's fine if you want to do that, but that is the schedule for going forward. And then Monday through Friday is fine. They were already here at all day into the late evening, early morning.
And another extracurricular activity that you may want to have your son or daughter consider every Wednesday from 7 to 8. Kim and I co-host a gathering by Zoom. Number one, just answer any questions your students have. Number two, to promote networking within the student body. And each time we invite 5 to 6 of our most distinguished alumni. So it's also a great networking opportunity. And there's that old saying, the last time you want to build a network is when you need to. And we try to cover all the different academic units. Tomorrow night we'll have the alum who's invented glasses to correct for color blindness join us, a prominent ed counseling graduate who recently, she and her husband, she's a trustee, and gave a 7-figure gift to ramp up what we do in our wellness center and diversify our wellness center. So it's a nice mix of people, and they generally offer their individual email addresses, so your son or daughter could follow up with them and ask them one-on-one any further questions.
Thanks. Mark, could you confirm the last day of this semester and then what the anticipated spring start is?
Wednesday, November 25th, the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. And then the spring is still, usually we start last week of January. I anticipate, but it's not finalized. The deans and the provost will determine this. We anticipate starting at least 1 to 2 weeks later than normal. So sometime in February.
Great. And then Tom Fraley has a question. Raise his hand.
Yeah, I don't know if this has been answered. You just answered the last date of classes, but will the move out be staggered like the move in? And especially if we have to remove all the belongings, the plan stays the same. How will the move out happen? Will it be after that last day? What's the date going to be? What's your plan right now for that?
Tamara, do you want to take that, or do you want me to answer?
Sure. That is a great question. We currently have a group of kind of experts in their area working on a plan for move out, as well as for if we have to pivot to a closure. So we're working on that, and my expectation would be that yes, we would do some kind of staggered moved out, so we did not have the density on campus, similar to what we did for move-in. So there should be more information about that as we get closer to November.
we've been trying to de-densify how many students are living in our residence halls. No more than 2 students to a room, no bunk beds. We're down roughly a third from our normal amount of students living on campus. Some couldn't get travel from out of the country, couldn't get visa. Some have underlying health conditions, so stay at home and take classes online. So that'll work in our favor in terms of staggering the move out.
Okay, thank you.
There's another question. In regards to food, I know that John Dietrich's name has been posted, and Kim, you've shared some of the issues involved with reloading. But to follow up with that, one of the other questions was, is the food service going to continue as is and prepackaged, or you want to just update the families about kind of how food is going now?
Sure. So since the start of the semester, there have been a number of locations where students can pick up their meals, where it is grab and go. We have this new app where students can pre-order so that they can, let's say order 10 minutes in advance and then show up and pick up their food and be on their way, instead of having to wait in line and place orders, exchange cash, all of those things. I've used it. It's actually really convenient and it's been working pretty well. It is different and it's new. Aid Dining Hall has been open for seated meals. So, students can go in there, and if they want to sit down and eat, they can do that. We have de-densified the space. So it doesn't fit as many students as typical, but we do have seats in there and they're socially distanced. And they can grab their food and have a seat. There isn't self-service. Like in the past, for example, students could walk up and go to a salad bar. We're not able to do that under these circumstances, but they can still get salads in a prepackaged container. So for the most part, we expect that this semester's meals will continue in that way, where there's a mix of pick up and take with you and sit down. There are also outdoor tents right now where students can be seated outside and eat so that they don't have to just, grab it and go back to their room. There are also designated spaces on campus where they can eat elsewhere. There are seated spaces upstairs here in Powell by the food service areas here. And then there are also some other lounges that are open for food as well, not to purchase, but to eat.
Tents outdoors with seating outdoors, if that's the preference, and so long as the weather stays favorable, we're going to rely on those options as well. Sports, somebody asked, right now we're still intending to have competitions in the spring and starting workouts with our individual teams. The nature of the workouts depends on how large the teams are, so that we gradually reestablish the right routines. And then Kim, there was a question on gym facilities and tennis courts. Do you want to tackle that?
Did you say, Mark, there's a question on gyms?
Gym and tennis courts.
So we are in the process of planning to open the fitness center. We plan to, at this point, relocate some of the equipment so that we can spread everyone out and use the equipment safely. We'll have an appointment system so that everyone is signing in and, it doesn't become too crowded at once. So once we get through testing, the first round of testing, we expect to be able to move the equipment and open it up for students, faculty, and staff to use. And tennis courts, I believe right now they're open only for faculty, staff, and students. If I'm not mistaken, Mark, I think they're open currently.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the tennis team's been out practicing in the morning on the way in.
Yeah.
There's a question, Mark, about my son or daughter is sick. Will they have the opportunity to remote into the class, or will they have to just miss class if it's an in-person class?
I think the plan in those cases is for video capture so that the faculty member then can share the material and can be accessed asynchronously. In certain cases, I think the participation can be synchronous, but the default is at least capturing the material for asynchronous distribution.
There's been some follow-up questions about the spring move-in date, and will students from hotspot states have to come early again to quarantine? Any updates in regards to what possibly spring could look like, Mark or team?
Yeah, I had a call late this afternoon with other area presidents, and it's like a group therapy session. So we keep learning from each other what's working, what's not working. And this was one of the topics of just bemoaning, God, we got to do this again in the spring. And what states are going to be on the travel advisory. We hope there's a therapeutic and vaccine that'll save the day. Some of our peers are still teaching after Thanksgiving, so they've got an even bigger set of issues to worry about if they allow students to go home for Thanksgiving. Because of the option to finish by Thanksgiving, that'll work in our favor. But if we're still in a situation like we are now, we'll probably have a very similar approach to what we did this fall.
I know that we are coming to the 8 o'clock hour. Hopefully we were able to capture a majority of the questions that were asked. Again, this is being recorded. And so many of the questions that have been asked have been answered earlier on. I would say that if you do have some specific questions that you'd like to have answered, I know Mark is on email all the time, I think, so he can at least get you into the right direction of who needs to be answered. And Kim, Tamara, Del Rey, Michael, all of us, John, are here too to help answer questions via email or give us a call. But Mark, did you want to say anything in closing?
Just thank you all for joining us. Keep the questions and suggestions for improvement coming. And most of all, we're very honored and privileged to have the opportunity to work with your sons and daughters. And let's keep protecting the bubble.
Thank you, everybody. Kim, anything from you to say goodbye?
Thank you, everyone. We appreciate it. We appreciate the support and are really thankful to have your students here with us. If there's anything we can do better, let us know.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night and be well.
Thank
you. Take care.